Hey everyone, it's Ankylosaur. I hope you're all doing well. For today's video, I wanted to make a follow-up to my last video, which was hyping up the online tournament Sanctuary Open Series number 4. This event was held over the weekend and had 28 players battling it out for the top spot, which is a great showing for an online CPDH tournament. Even more impressive than that, of those 28 players, 25 of them brought unique commanders, leading to an incredibly diverse and interesting field. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. While the finals were won by Third Path Iconoclast, one of the top performing decks of last year's tournament scene, and Gretchen, Malcolm, and Abdel decks of various kinds were also in attendance, as always, in this video, I want to feature some of the spice people brought to the table. The deck lists that haven't seen much tournament play yet, but still managed to get at least one win during the event. I'll have a link to all of the decks from the event below in the video description, so you'll be able to follow along as I break them down. But with that out of the way, let's talk some sweet brews. First up is one of the finalists from the event, Aaron, who brought Sir Conrad the Grim, finishing with 2 wins on the day, which, out of a 4-round EDH event, is a great showing. There were 2 Conrad control decks in the tournament, and they both have very similar game plans. More than 30 creatures, a bunch of sweepers and removal, and ways to take advantage of Conrad's powerful triggered ability, which damages each opponent every time another creature dies, goes to the graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or when a creature leaves the graveyard. The creature package in the deck synergizes well with its card draw suite. A lot of cheap creatures with death triggers, plus cards like Deadly Dispute, or Corrupted Conviction, that draw 2 cards if you sacrifice a creature. This turns your Shambling Ghast, or Greedy Freebooter, into a treasure token, which can help ramp into the 5-mana Sir Conrad, or lets you clean up a bunch of tokens at instant speed with Death's Head Buzzard, for instance, dealing a ton of damage with Conrad in the process. As a Malcolm player at the event, I was virtually locked out of the game I played against Aaron in the Swiss when he deployed an early Kumbai Witches, a fantastic card for black-based control decks in multiplayer, as you can team up with someone else at the table to shoot down a 2-toughness creature, or 2 1-toughness creatures, each turn. I also want to shout out Toxin Analysis, as a card that not only gains a bit of life from Conrad's triggers, but can combine with something else like a Crypt Rats, or Gangrenous Zombies, to gain a lot of life all at once, while also killing all creatures in play, giving you a clue token to boot. And don't sleep on the finisher, Tortured Existence, which looks like a value piece at first glance, but with Conrad in play, a creature in hand, and a creature in the graveyard, it deals 2 damage to each opponent per black mana spent, a huge burst of damage that can close out a game out of nowhere. Next, I wanted to look at a pair of Selesnya beatdown decks. Hive Cryptid's build of Wilson Refined Grizzly and Far Traveler, as well as Beachbod God's Mystic Enforcer list. Hive Cryptid also had 2 wins with their deck, just missing the top cut on tiebreakers, while Beachbod God came in 10th with 1 win. These are both decks that, on the surface, have the same end goal: play out their commanders, suit them up with some auras like Armadillo Cloak, Moldervine Cloak, and Rancor, and beat up the table with them until the game is over. However, the rest of their decks couldn't be less similar. Hive Cryptid leans heavily into the blink strategy of Far Traveler, running 31 creatures in their deck, almost all of which either have an Enters the Battlefield ability, like Skyscanner or Stonehorn Dignitary, or lets them reuse those abilities, as with Core Skyfisher or Aviary Mechanic, returning those ETB creatures to hand. This means that every end step, they're probably drawing an extra card, or searching up an aura with Shrine Steward, or moving farther into the Undercity dungeon with Avenging Hunter, pushing their advantage further ahead each turn. Meanwhile, Beachbod God is looking to achieve Threshold by putting 7 or more cards in his graveyard as quickly as possible, turning Mystic Enforcer into a 6/6 flyer with protection from black as early as turn 4. With cards like Roots of Wisdom and Mulch, he's able to fill the graveyard while also looking for lands to make sure he keeps hitting mana sources in his 27 land deck. And I've got to shout out anyone running Provoke in their list. It's one of my pet cards in the format, a cantrip that also acts as a removal spell in combat, either by forcing a block on his 6/6 commander, or on an opponent's creature during a combat step Beachbod God isn't even involved with. You definitely love to see it. 2 sweet green-white decks, 2 very different paths to victory. Next, we have Lobert's Sphinx Summoner deck. This is an artifact-heavy Dimir deck, looking to use the tutor power of its commander to try to search up pieces for an infinite combo that kills the table on the spot. Let's start by looking at the combo. It takes several pieces, but basically, with Mirror Retriever and Workshop Assistant, plus a cost reducer like Foundry Inspector and an Ashnod's Altar, you can make infinite mana. First, sacrifice the Workshop Assistant for 2 colorless, and sacrifice the Mirror Retriever for 2 more mana. Then, with the Mirror Retriever's trigger, you return the Workshop Assistant to hand. Since Workshop Assistant costs 2 with the Foundry Inspector in play, you can recast it, sacrifice it for 2 more mana, and use its trigger to get back the Mirror Retriever. Mirror Retriever's cost is reduced to only 1 mana, so when you cast it, and sacrifice it for 2 mana to get back the Workshop Assistant again, each time you run through this loop, you'll net 1 colorless mana. If you have a Cabal Paladin in play, your combo is complete here. Each time you cast one of the artifact creatures, it will trigger the Paladin, dealing 2 damage to each opponent and winning you the game. However, if you have something like a Basilica Screecher or a Secret Door as your finisher, you need 1 more piece to the puzzle, which is something like Stonework Pack Beast. This allows you to filter your colorless mana into colored mana, which then allows you to extort the table to death or venture into the Lost Mine of Phandelver dungeon enough times to drain out the table. Much simpler, though, is just playing out a bunch of artifacts, transmuting multiple mixture for cranial plating, and smacking people for 16 commander damage in the air, which is a very solid plan B to have in your back pocket. Our next list is from South Lakes Vibes, who is running Wrath, Weatherlight Stalwart. This is a token-focused deck with a lot of counterspells, including several that don't see much play in the format, like Flip the Switch and Rites of Refusal, which are looking to take advantage of Wrath's ability to draw extra cards off your instant and sorcery spells by tapping 2 creatures when you cast them. This turns spells like Recruitment Drive and Clowning Around into cantrips that also build out your board, giving you more creatures to tap for Wrath to draw even more cards as you hold up all that counter magic on your opponent's turns. Finally, once you have an army, you can use Wrath's activated ability to give all those tokens +1/+1 in Vigilance until end of turn, hitting for huge chunks of damage and eventually closing out the game. I really love some of the more flexible cards in this list, like Charge of the Mites, which could either be a removal spell or a token generator, and Mental Journey, which is just on the cusp of making it into so many of my lists. An instant that draws 3 cards is huge, and if you're stuck on mana in the early game, you can always cycle it away for a land, ensuring that it's rarely dead at any point in the game. Definitely a cool deck, and one that I expect to continue to evolve going forward. Next is Azra Oddsmaker, courtesy of Gatorbait TV, which is a Rakdos mid-range value deck with a strong Madness sub-theme. Because Oddsmaker lets you discard a card at the beginning of your combat to quote-unquote bet on a creature dealing combat damage to a player, that card you discard can be a Madness spell like Fiery Temper to clear a blocker out of the way for only 1 mana, or a Kitchen Imp to give you an invasive, hasty threat. Then, when the creature you bet on connects, you get to draw 2 cards, which helps you dig through your deck to find a plethora of removal and discard spells, keeping the table under control while you build out your resources, eventually ending the game either through combat damage or a big Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Speaking of discard, this deck is chock full of ways to take cards out of your opponent's hands, with creatures like Mindleech Ghoul and spells like Tassiger's Cruelty. This is another way the deck compounds its resource advantage, making the rest of the table play off the tops of their decks while you're drawing cards with Oddsmaker every turn. We also saw a Killian Ink Duelist deck show up in the hands of Brennan Lloyd. This is a black-white deck looking to gain a lot of life and drain the table out with Extort. Its commander's ability to reduce the cost of spells that target creatures works on 2 different axes here, both helping to suit up Killian or your other creatures with beneficial auras on the cheap, or, more often, getting a nice discount on powerful removal spells like Crib Swap and Slice from the Shadows. Many of the spells Lloyd chose for the deck cantrip as well, like Scourge Mark and Curtain of Light, allowing them to rip through their deck to find even more removal to clear the way for Killian to get in damage. It's not quite full-on Voltron, but there are definitely Voltron elements involved here, and with Killian's lifelink and menace abilities, it doesn't take much to get some huge life swings in your favor. And finally, we have Rasad in Bashir with Feywild Visitor, played by Addicted to Soda. This is an aggro deck looking to leverage cheap creatures with high toughness, like Aegis Turtle and Maned Serval, in combination with their commander, Rasad, who lets them assign combat damage equal to that toughness instead of their power. Because I was curious, I tried to figure out the deck's dream draw. The best I could come up with is turn 1 Cloudfin Raptor, into turn 2 Cloud of Fairies, which triggers Evolve, into a Phyrexian Walker, Evolve, Ornithopter, Yolkdox, Evolve, and Aegis Turtle, Evolve. Then, turn 3 you play Rasad, and attack for 20. Not a bad start. And then, if you follow it up on turn 4 with an Aarakocra Sneak, to take the initiative and turn on Rasad's second ability, you get a swing in for 46. Drew a Solidarity instead? Now your turn 4 is an attack for 58. I think the Rasad Feywild decks are a ton of fun. And while it is a bit dependent on its commander for it to function as intended, the deck also runs a ton of protection spells to keep Rasad in play, so you're able to keep swinging with your turtles all game long. So there you have it, some of the spiciest decks that won at least one match at Sanctuary Open Series 4. One last bonus deck, special shout out to Alcadron, who unfortunately had a rough tournament, but did show up with Death Rattle Oni, a commander I've been trying to brew since it was first spoiled, so I was thrilled to see someone bring that guy out to play. I think it has a lot of potential, and I love that it got some love. As I mentioned before, I'll have links to all the deck lists over on Sanctuary PDH's Moxfield page down in the video description below. And as always, if you have any feedback or want to talk more about any of these decks, please let me know. I'm very happy to hear from you and to chat more about this or any of my other videos. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll be back with another CPDH video soon. Bye!